Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi, Hi, my name is Nancy and I'm an alcoholic. Is that too loud? Is that okay? Okay, good. Well, first of all, thank you so much to the people that are organizing this. This is actually my first event here, so I'm very grateful to be here. And most importantly, to have an opportunity to speak. And it's very, very, very true to me. And I'm so sorry because I was supposed to do this in Spanish, so I'm trying to switch to English. But anybody that sits here, obviously we all qualify to be up here, so I'm very grateful that at this time it's been my opportunity. So thank you for being here as well. But I'm going to get this started right away because I really want to talk a little bit more about from the day that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm going to spend a little bit about my background so that you can have an understanding where I come from. I was actually born in Michoacán, Nueva Italia, Michoacán, Mexico. So I was about a few months old when my parents came to the United States, and we grew up in California. My little brother had just been born. He was 4 months, and my mom was pregnant with a third one. So, very young couple. My dad is from the state of Hidalgo, Pachuca, and I'll say why that's important in my life, too, as well, because, well, I'll let you know in a little bit. So here they are, mom and dad, immigrants to this country, no English, but with the great desire to give us a better life, you know. So a lot of my uncles and my aunts are already in California, and so my mom was one of the youngest sisters in a huge family. My mother was very close to my grandmother, and so she was kind of the last ones to leave Mexico. But when we came to California, we actually grew up in Alhambra, California, and Alhambra is a very blonde, blue-eyed neighborhood. So, you know, it's so funny when you're a kid, you don't see any differences. You know, I just thought that these kids were my friends, and, you know, of course, you know, we lived in a part of, because in Alhambra there's a lot of factories, so in the area that we grew up with, there was a lot of immigrants from different countries, you know, not just Mexico, but El Salvador, you know, South America, Central America. And so I don't remember growing up poor. I just remember, you know, I grew up in a very loving family, always with my mom and dad. You know, if they had problems or issues, I don't know, I don't remember. But I just remember that a lot of the weekends were spent with a lot of family, you know, because in my family, you know, it's like my uncle is my uncle, but he's also my godfather, and then my older cousin is my cousin, but he's also my godfather. So there's, you know, so in our family, we just kind of like baptize each other and, you know, first communion. And the whole rule is that, you know, if anything happens to the parents, it's the godparents that raise the children, but we're all still around, and my uncles and aunts are still around, so we're all good. Growing up, nobody went to any, you know, no other families, and the thing is, but I remember my dad and my uncle. See, alcohol has always been a very big part of, you know, at least in my family. You know, I wish I can generalize it everywhere in the Hispanic culture, but I'm just going to talk about my family. And I remember, like, it was every weekend, and it was always about getting together, you know, because you have a group of people that come from another place, and so we find that joy and comfort when we would get together on the weekends. And it didn't even have to be a special occasion. All it was a nice sunny day, and we'd all get together. And and that's how I grew up. You know, I remember everybody in the kitchen making tamales, and it wasn't just like 2 aunts. It was like 13 aunts, you know, and cousins, and, you know, I mean, it was just so many people. And so, and it was all just about food, but the alcohol part, that was very dominated by the men in the family. And, you know, I don't remember a lot of the times where my aunts or my mom were heavy alcohol drinkers, you know, maybe a beer or, you know, they call them a little cubita, you know, just a little drink with, you know, with a Coke or whatever, and that's it. And so there's a lot of things that I remember that it wasn't a big deal that there was alcohol in the family. As a matter of fact, there was always like that one uncle that kind of drank just a little too much, you know. He never wanted to go home. He wanted to always stay for 2-3 days. And so, we're all family, so it really didn't matter. I mean, we're all just family. If he was, we call it necio, Necio is just like, he ain't budging, You can sit there and say, let's go. Vámonos. No, you're not going to make a move. If there's alcohol there, my uncle's staying. And so, in my culture, what we do is we have another event the day after whatever party we have. It's called el recalentado. So that just means that the very next day there's going to be menudo or some type of soup, so people can come back and gather and continue to eat and drink or whatever. So, and that's where my aunt will come pick up my uncle, the one that drinks a little too much. But in the meantime, I just thought it was so much fun because as we were getting older, it wasn't like it was a taboo. Like the alcohol was always available to all of us, and it wasn't like we were just sitting there, drinking them. It was just, they just happened to be there. So we were the cleaning crew, So we would, we'd take a little sip and take another little sip, and and it's so funny because someone had posted something about that, if you go to a Mexican party and there's more tequila and alcohol than gifts, and then you make your kids the bartenders, hey, go get your uncle a beer, that's what we did, So it was no big deal. But I remember the first time I had beer was, I must have been about maybe 5, 6, 7, and the rule was that when my dad would get out of work, the kid that would make it to the refrigerator the fastest and bring him his Coors, we would take the first sip. What I remember about that, I don't remember, oh my God, I love the way it made me feel. I just remember that beer was so cold and it burned my throat. And it just felt like an explosion in my chest, and that feeling. And I thought to myself, oh, this is disgusting, But that's my memory of alcohol or beer. But after that, I don't remember having any events that I can sit here and say, oh, I passed out, I had blackouts. Everything else is just basically tasting drinks, or, if grandma was having a little sip of something, she'd give me a little sip of something. So that's basically what it was. So my mom and dad, like I said, they came to this country. So now here's me, and then there's 3 little brothers, and my dad drinking a little too much. My mother now working almost 3 jobs. My dad couldn't get a job, couldn't hold a job. And so my grandmother came, and she started living with us. And so my grandmother is very important to me because technically she was like my mother because she's the one that raised me. And so, because I hardly ever saw my parents. But I remember when my grandmother passed away, it was really, really hard for me. And one of the things, I'm going to cry. I promised I wasn't going to cry. So one of the things I discovered about myself when I did this thing called an inventory, written inventory, that a lot of the fears manifest in our writing, especially in our actions. And there's 2 things that manifested in mine personally. And I realize that now as an adult, but I didn't know that when I was a kid. So the 2 things that I didn't realize that I suffered from the most was abandonment issues and low self-esteem. And there were the 2 fears that drove a lot of the actions that I took, whether it was getting into a relationship or getting married or thinking that I wasn't happy at home, I was the girl that had the wedding dress and the wedding planned except the groom, So I always had these fantasies of what my marriage was going to be. And my marriage was going to mimic my parents less, a couple of things that I didn't like. So I was going to tweak my relationship with this guy, right? So, but right when my grandmother passed away, it was really hard for me because I did grow up Catholic with her. She taught me a lot of things, and so I think I've always believed in God. I really do, and so that wasn't a big issue when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. But I remember when she passed away, it was really hard for me because I connected the church with my grandmother. So it was really hard for me just to go even visit a church because then I just would totally break down. So right around 14, I met 2 Mormon missionaries, and I'm going to mention this because it's a big part of my, when I grew up. So I got baptized in the Mormon church, and so I think in a lot of sense it kind of saved me from, I lived, by then we moved to East LA, and it was a very heavy environment. It was very dense. There was a lot of gangs and a lot of girls getting pregnant. And but I think when I joined the church, what it did, it just gave me a different way of living, and very necessary for a 14-year-old girl, living in East LA. So I joined the church, and I became very active. And as a matter of fact, I thought I was gonna go on a mission. If we're not married by we're 21, the women get to serve, in the Latter-day Saint church. So I ended up doing all these little mini missions, and very active Sunday school teacher in the choir. We danced folklorico. So they taught us all these dances. So I was very active. But right around when I was 19, and still again, they practice a lot of chastity, and they practice a lot of abstinence from like alcohol, coffee. They say that the clearer our mind is, the more we get to connect. So they do a lot of prayer meditation. So again, that wasn't a big issue for me either when I walked into AA. But right around 19, I remember I just kind of felt really different. I just remember even in the church, I just felt so out of place. I never felt like I fit in, even in that environment. I had a lot of struggles with my parents because all of a sudden, they wanted me to hang out with them on Sundays, and I said, no, I can't. I have to go to the church, and you don't understand. And I mean, I was fighting this, everything that the church was teaching me about family and love and kindness. I was totally going against it, in my mind, because I was so confused, at that point. But I remember right around 19, I met my husband, my first husband, and he was kind of like the black sheep of the family. His dad was the bishop, Mother Relief Society president. And this guy was like he didn't go on a mission. He rode a motorcycle. He owned a Mustang. And so he was just kind of like, he used a lot of drugs. He drank. So, I was supposed to be the one that was, was supposed to bring him to the church. And so what ended up happening is it was actually the other way around. He introduced me to a whole another way of living. And it was just very, for some reason, I kind of felt comfortable there, I really did. It's like, it was the first time I've never had steak and lobster. Well, I've had steak, but lobster, I go, how do you eat that? And a brandy, and all this stuff. I just thought it was so high, like, whoa, this is like, because I'm like beans and rice and tortillas, eggs, that's it, And I meet this guy, I'm 19, he's 27, and I just thought he was just the world to me. And so, but that's what happened, little by little, he introduced me to another world, and I really, really did feel comfortable. I felt comfortable in that environment. But, the thing is, they say that, back then, I really think I would have qualified for this other program that we have out there, that especially those of us who have people that have alcohol and, other issues, whether it's drugs or whatever. And I remember back then, when we got married, my world was just so dark. It really was. Everyone actually thought I was a single parent. He would never go anywhere with me. I would cry. I was so miserable in my marriage, and I blamed everything. Thank goodness for the steps, because I know my mentality changed of all that. But I blamed him for everything. I put so much pressure on this man to make me happy. That's his responsibility. The reason I feel like this. And I just remember, I don't remember when I crossed that line, because we used to drink together, but it was no big deal because I was the one throwing the party. So what's the big deal? I wasn't, I was still cooking, I was still the host, but like I said, in my mind, I just went into that dark depression, and I think that's what it was. I was so depressed, I was so miserable. The time came where my marriage actually ended, and I just kind of said, what's the use? Like, what am I doing? And I just remembered when I finally, it was really hard for me because I think we separated like 3, 4, 5 times. And I remember telling my mom and dad about my marriage. And, okay, so, my mom was the type of person like, if you're not happy, leave him. And then I get my dad saying, what's wrong with you? You got to fix this. Maybe you're the problem. How are you going to have this man leave you? And so, and I don't know, like my dad's mentality is like, that as women, we're not supposed to be alone. We're supposed to always have somebody take care of us. And so it was kind of a little hard for me because I just felt that pressure to stay in that marriage. And but what ended up happening is, I became alcoholic at that point because I was just so depressed. But I was one of those functioning alcoholics, I was the one that had the kid on my hip, and a spoon, and I'm cooking, and I'm having my drinks, and, so, like, I thought to myself, if I can function and not lose my job and still take care of my kids, am I really an alcoholic? Do I really have an issue, And like, so for me, I was always confused about that part too, like, because I don't remember when I even became an alcoholic. I really don't remember. I've always been this great actress, in front of my family. I was so put together, and my friends. Never talked ill about George. Never talked bad about my kids. Not that we were perfect, but I never exaggerated anything. No good or bad. When we finally divorced, I remember I moved back with my mom and dad. And it was it's no big deal because even in our culture, there's always 3 generations in our home. It's always the grandparents, and then the parents, and then the kids. Or, the uncles that live with us and the cousins and the neighbors' cousins. So I don't remember ever living by myself with my mom and dad. There was always people, always people. And, my mom and dad, God bless them, they've always, let me tell you, if you came to the door and you were hungry, let me tell you, you were going to come in the house and eat. There was no way. And if you didn't have a place to stay, you were going to stay at our house. And so, I don't know, I think, my mom and dad, with whatever skills they have, I think they really, they did provide me, a lot of wonderful elements that I get to now carry with me today as an adult. My brother was in the military, my youngest brother, when he came back, okay, I'm just going to say this. So we had a meth lab. We wanted to make money, it was kind of cute. I dated the Hispanic guys that had the cards that can go to Lowe's and get the stuff to clean the, well, it's a long process, I'm a really good cook. I'm a really good cook. So my stuff was good. People knew, out in the streets. And so all of a sudden, our business took off, and and let me tell you, that little world, you think it's years and years, but it really is a really small 3 month, 6 month, 9 month business, especially if you get hooked on that stuff. And like I said, I just went into these really dark places. I enticed a lot of my gal pals to let me borrow their kitchen so we can cook the stuff there. And a lot of our guy friends, they ended up really just losing everything, And I have a lot of amends to do still, and but in the sense of all the stuff that we did, and see, I forgot all this stuff, because I walk into AA, I'm like, I'm just kind of, I'm crying because of what happened the night before, and then you stick around a little long enough, and then you realize, that there was a pattern from the beginning till the day I walked in, but moving forward, I always have all these conversations in my head. As my daughter was laughing because I'm up there talking to myself. She goes, "Are you kidding me? Are you talking to yourself, Mom?" And I kept telling Alexis, "I don't know what I'm going to say." I don't know. I go, "Mom, whatever you say, just don't lie," because you always exaggerate stuff. I'm not lying. This is my truth. And so I'm so glad she's up in the room. And I told her just to please stay up there. So, but anyway, but I just remember always being this great actress, always, I always wanted to look put together. As a matter of fact, that marriage ended, and I ended up meeting my second husband like 4 years later. And I really was in that lonely place, and I don't even know, because like I said, a person who's healthy is going to seek a healthy relationship, in the healthiest way. What I did is I got AOL, I logged in, I gave myself a name, and I met him on the internet. So here, so we started chatting back and forth, because we're honest when we're in the internet, right? Like we never lie, And so anyway, so that's how I met, Joaquin, and he lived in Austin, and so, by then, I was basically sleeping off the stuff that I was on, because, I'm so prideful. I'm such a prideful woman that there's no way I was going to go to a treatment center or whatever. And so, my way of curing things was like, I'll just sleep it off. And I really did. I don't even know how that happened. But it's so funny because I got off the drugs, but the alcohol just kept going, because it's there. You can buy it at the liquor store. It's no big deal. That's what I thought. My family was still drinking. What's the big deal? But again, it was still that my frame of thinking, my mind, that I was just so depressed. I was so depressed, and it's so funny because I just came back from California and my aunt was telling me, she goes, Nancy, you were always so happy. It's so funny because in my mind I was depressed, and my aunt remembers me always being happy, even through my tragedies, my tragedy. She goes, I never ever saw you cry. You were always just like, the next guy, like whatever, I must have been really drunk, because I don't remember acting that way. I mean, she was just telling me I was just always such a happy-go-lucky person. But, when I married Joaquin, he had said, the deal was, because it was a deal, we had a little, I didn't even know who this guy was. We exchanged photos. He thought I was cute. Well, it was an old photo, and I was really thin. And so, thank God, he thought I was still cute when he met me. But anyway, and so, the deal was that he wanted to get his papers, his residency, because he was from Mexico. And I said, I can do that. I will marry you, and I will get you legalized here in the United States. I can do that. And then in my mind, I thought, he can take me away from everything, all the stuff that I used to do when I was in California, because I did a lot of stuff, I really did. I had no morals. I was totally lost, and I did things that, I did things that I thought that I would never cross the line. And it's not stuff that I would talk with my friends. It was just stuff that was always in my head. I'll never do that. I'm never going to sleep with that guy and his brother, I'm never going to do that. So and then all of a sudden, you start crossing all these lines, and your self-esteem, it just goes to the floor, and you're gone. Now imagine, here I am, female, Hispanic, with 3 brothers. I just felt like I carried a lot of burden. I kind of raised my brothers, and I was the oldest person, I was the eldest in my house, so I was the one that got to open the mail and read to my parents, so I carried a lot of responsibility in that sense, so as a little girl. It was always about, I knew when they owed money, I knew if they had any issues legally, especially when they were getting their citizenship taken care of. So there was a lot of stuff that I just felt so responsible for my parents, as very young at age. But once again, when I started doing all this stuff and drinking, it was just like that relief of like, oh, thank God, I don't have to worry about this right now. I don't have to even think about it. When I married Joaquin, he says, he told me, do you want me to move to California? I said, no, I want to leave California. So I ended up coming to Austin. And so when I moved to Austin, I really wasn't really drinking, here I'm living with this guy that I barely know. I'm dragging my 3 little girls with me. Wow. Where was my mind, Broke my mom and dad's heart. She tried to convince me, what are you doing? Who is this person? But at least me, I was so selfish. I was just thinking about myself. I just wanted to get out of there. Never asked my kids if they wanted to go with me. They were little, so I thought, I'm the responsible adult. I make those decisions, because I'm going to say what happens in my family. And thank goodness he turned out to be a very nice, loving person. Very fortunate that I was. I remember that we lived together for at least 3-4 months, and we had no relation, because I was trying to get to know this guy that I just married, that I met on the internet. And so, 3-4 months, and he was very respectful, and, I had my own room, and, finally I said, okay, let's bring out that alcohol, I got to get this thing started, and I just remember, because I had not had really a really good buzz, a good, drinking session. I called it a drinking session. And I just remember, I was just so due, I was like, okay. And so finally, I just remember that's actually when I started picking up the heavy drinking again. I mean, it just happened like, it wasn't like, I don't know how it just happened, All of a sudden I'm drinking, and I'm drinking this Midori stuff. I'm drinking all this Southern Comfort, all this stuff that all it is, I just wanted it to make me feel good for that moment. But I just remember not stopping either. And it never, thank goodness, it never took me back to that, that using drugs, or at least at that point, I was still very, I was trying to wrap my mind around, still trying to say, how did I get here? Like, what am I doing? What, I didn't even know where my life was going. I had no sense of direction. Right about in our, 1, 2, 3, 4. So within 4 years, by then we bought a house together. He went from working as a sous chef, so by then I had gained about 70 pounds, because he'd bring me food all the time. And I gained a lot of weight, and I ended up actually having a surgery, and it's called bypass. And if you don't know what that is what it does is I had really bad diabetes. I was losing my eyesight, and so I qualified for this surgery where they reduce your stomach, and so the moment you have that surgery, you no longer have to take metformin. You don't, high blood pressure. You take nothing. You can just toss all that out the window. Well, I lost about 130 pounds, and man, did I look hot. So I thought, right? And I thought to myself, what am I doing with this guy? I could do so much better, and I convinced myself, and the doctor had said, if you used to drink 6 vodka martinis, you will now have 1, and you're going to get the same effect. I said, wow, that is so awesome, You mean I'm going to get drunk like in my mind, right? But he also said, but if you drink that way, you're also going to damage your, everything inside of you, your, whatever. I can't even say it in English. Anyway, so I don't remember that consequence. All I remember is that the drinking part was awesome, because I can have a drink, and the doctor said that within 45 minutes after you have a really good buzz or a blackout, you're going to wake up out of it. You'll never have a hangover, blah, blah, blah. I thought, oh, my God, this is so awesome, I was so happy. And so what ended up happening is, I all of a sudden, I wanted to work late and work more hours, and, so he was home with the kids, so what's the big deal? I became a, workaholic, and of course I have to go with my friends and have a drink, it's just a margarita, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Oh, what, ropers? Country music, of course I want to go. It's only one night, it's only once a week, what's the big deal? And before I knew it, I wasn't even coming home. I would look at that clock, and it was around 9:10, and I knew my friends were gathering there, and I was trying to pick a fight with him, and he never wanted to fight with me, and it's like, damn it, And, so I go, what am I going to do if I really want to go? And I couldn't convince him, and I don't know when I made the decision of just saying, you know what, I'm just going to go, and I did. I told him in his face, you know what, I'm out of here. Where are you going? Well, I'm going to go blah, blah, blah with my friends and this and that. And he's all like, oh, okay. I mean, he was just such a nice guy, and I don't know, like I said, I think I took advantage of him in a whole lot of ways. And see, but I didn't remember all of this stuff, When I was drinking, I just thought he was just so cold, and he wasn't romantic, and he wasn't the things that I wanted in a marriage. And, so it was just all this stuff that I had made up, an excuse. On October 30th, I was at work, and we had just gotten into a really bad fight, and because I was coming home late, I was coming home at 3, 4, 5 in the morning. I had no idea who I was waking up with. I was calling my friends and telling them, can you please tell them that I stayed at your couch? Can you please tell them that, that I was with you? And so, I mean, I had a group of women lying for me. And, I don't know what I was doing, to be honest with you. I really don't know. I don't know what was I trying to accomplish. After a while, I wasn't even hiding my behavior, not even around my kids, But I remember that day he called me in the morning, and he said, hey, I want to talk to you. And I said, Joaquin, I don't want to talk to you right now. He says, Nancy, what's going on? Like talk to me. And I just remember, says, don't call me right now because I'm busy. And I told you when I take calls, I cannot talk to you because you're pissing me off. And I hung up the phone, and that was probably about 10:30 in the morning. Right around 12:45 that same day, my supervisor comes over, and he says, hey, he goes, I need you to come with me to HR. And I said, okay. And so, it was right around my anniversary, I had just, with my company, and I was all like joking. I go, so am I going to get flowers? And, are we going to get pizza? Is this a little party for me? And I just remember him saying, no, you're just being silly, blah, blah, just come with me. And I remember walking, so HR, you walk through all the departments, and then you go all the way to the end of the hall. And I just remember, this is what I remember that day. So it was around 12:45, and everybody at work dresses in khaki. It's a very casual dress. And I just remember the door swinging to the left. And on the right-hand side, there were seats, and there was 3 men sitting there with, I remember, khaki pants and navy blue shirts, and they had badges on. And then as the door kept swinging, there was a lady sitting there in a nice gray suit, older lady. And the door kept swinging open, and there's my friend. She's one of the coaches there, but a really, really good friend of mine that I met at work. And then I see her there, and then as the door just kept, it was just so weird, it's like a movie, right? So, and then when the door swung all the way, there was, I don't know, what do you call him? The guy from Williamson County, deputy, yes, and he's wearing his hat and all this stuff, and he's standing there with he's holding his hand, and he's looking down on the floor. And when I saw him, I said, oh my God, something happened to one of my kids. And it's so funny because God bless the professional community, the lady, she just said, Mrs. Pacheco, I regret to inform you that your husband died in a fatality. And we're here if you need to speak to us. And it was the postmasters that were on the right-hand side from Georgetown and from Austin and from another, I think it was Cedar Park, they were there. And the first thing I said to myself, because it was like that tunnel vision. Someone said that I had passed out, but I don't remember passing out. It was just like a shutter, like a camera, like it closes and it opens it back up again. And the only thing in my mind was, oh, thank God it was him and not my kids. That's what I said. I know it sounds cruel, but at that point, I wasn't thinking. I was really, I don't know what happened to me, because I don't remember the funeral. I don't remember, a lot of my friends who were photographers in LA, they flew out here, and so they did a lot of photos, and they did this little, that's the only reason I know I was at the funeral. And I just remember being this fabulous host. I told my mom, she flew from California, and she says, I'll be there in a few days. And I remember when she got there, I'm like, Mom, what are we going to cook? We're going to have all these people. What are we going to make? Can we make mole? Can we make barbacoa? What are we going to cook? I mean, I was just like in this daze. And what I was doing is I was just trying to avoid that last conversation I had with him. And I just remember a lot of drinking. I just remember a lot, any second there was always somebody bringing me a drink and putting a drink in front of me. And I don't remember downing. I just remember taking little sips and leaving it there, and then I walk over here, take another little sip. But I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember what was going on in my mind. I just remember I just wanted to be this wonderful host. 2 weeks later, after my mom left, his friends who flew in from Florida and other states, after everybody left, that's when I had my horrible meltdown. My mother took my kids, and she says, I think it's important that I take them with me so that you can take care of everything that you have to do legally. You don't need the pressure right now. Let me take Alexis with me. And I said, okay. And so she ended up taking my youngest, my 2 older ones. Again, I'm divorced, so the 2 older ones went with their dad. My mom took the little one. And, she took her to grieving counseling over there. I mean, my mom took care of that little girl. And see, what happened is, all of a sudden, I thought, like, oh, my God, I'm free. This is so weird. I didn't say, oh, I love him and I miss him. I was so selfish at that point. I thought to myself, well, thank God, because if we would have gotten divorced, we had to sell the house. Because I remember I thought to myself, I killed him because I wanted him dead. You don't understand. I wanted him dead. And I said, if he died, everything would be so much easier. But when that happened, it just traumatized me so much. And I just, even to this day, I really don't even talk about that part because I'm so ashamed of the way I felt and the things I used to say. I started going to a grieving counselor. And once again, I have so much respect for PI. And my very last, and by then I was back to my drinking with my friends. Well, who's going to stop me? I live by myself now. My husband's dead. My kid's with my mother. I look cute, and I really did. I just thought, this is great. This is perfect. And now I'm a widow. That sounds awesome. That's an awesome title, I'm a widow. Hi, I'm a widow. Nobody was asking me. I was going to HEB. Hi, how are you? Good, I'm a widow. It's so weird. It was just like my badge, like, oh, this is so awesome. I didn't realize I was crazy, And so I remember my older daughter, she came to visit me, and by then I had joined the gym, and I really thought, man, I look good, I really didn't. It's all in my mind. But I met a trainer there. He was just a kid. He was just a kid. And I remember he'd always flirt with me. He's like, oh, yeah, I like older women, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, you want to meet me? We can meet somewhere, have a drink, I'm like setting everything up. I go, oh, but my friends are going, oh, okay, we can meet there, And this was the night, before my last session with David. And all that time, I was such an actress, I was just telling how much I love my husband. What a wonderful mother I am, the sacrifices I've done all this time, this wonderful person. But I remember that, and remember, I had that surgery. So remember I told you if I have one drink or two, it was just like me having like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. See, I remember going to that club, and it was somewhere around 6 o'clock, 6:30. And I thought to myself, if I have maybe 2 vodka cranberry juice, because I used to like to drink that stuff. If I have a couple, I'll be okay. I'm going to be fine. What's the big deal? And I remember walking into that club. I remember even when I was getting ready at home, I remember doing my hair because I wanted to look cute. I had a little night bag, just in case, threw it in the back of the car, because we all do that. Well, no, not everybody, but I did. Sorry. I had my little just in case bag, And so, but I just remember packing that stuff, and whatever. I go, well, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's okay. And by then I had told my older daughter, but then she was 16. I think she was 16 or 16. And I said, hey, Marilyn, I'm going to go out for a little bit with my friends. Okay, Mom, have a good time. She knew Joaquin had just died and everything. And so, I had her blessing to go out with my friends. I was like, yes, this is perfect. I remember I got there somewhere like around 6 o'clock, 6:30, and I walked in there. I went straight to the bar, and I said, okay, if I have that very first drink, it's going to warm up my body, just going to loosen me up so I can relax. And then I found the group of women that I had, that we got together, and so I sat there, and I had that drink, and then I said, well, I'm going to have one more, and I ended up having that second one, like almost right away, because I was so nervous this guy was going to be there, right? And so I waited, and I looked at the door, and I go, I wonder what he looks like, because I've never seen him dressed. Well, not dressed. He was he was wearing his workout clothes. I didn't know what he looked like with a shirt and well, you know what I mean. He was, okay, good. Okay, sorry. Am I being recorded? Yeah, okay. So, but anyway. So I didn't know what he was going to look like, and so I was all anxious and excited, and so he wasn't showing up, and I go that's this jerk. He didn't even show up, oh, what a jerk, So I'm sitting there, and I thought, well, I'm going to have another one. What's the big deal? It's just me, right? So I'm not even going to worry about this guy. So by the time he showed up, I probably had 5. Again, if I have one drink, it's like having 5. So by then, I don't remember anything. I don't remember how we got there. I don't remember he and I driving to my house. I don't remember me waking up in my bed. I don't remember who drove and like nothing. And that was probably the worst blackout I've ever had. And it was somewhere around 9:45. It wasn't even that late. 9:45. 9:45 p.m., you know. Obviously, my kid is still up, you know. I have a pretty big house, so when you walk in, her bedroom was all the way around to the back. So I just remember someone going, "Mom!" And I just remember my head spinning, right? I just remember this I go, what's going, like I opened my eyes, I'm like, where am I? Like I didn't even know where I was. Well, I was dressed, I mean, so I don't know. I mean, well, I'm not naked, you know, I'm dressed. And I just remember the pounding of my door, and I said, oh. So I opened the door, and it was my daughter, and she says, Mom, what are you doing? And I said, what? There's a guy in the living room, he doesn't have a shirt on, and he's on the computer, and his shoes are by the door. What are you doing? I go, Marilyn, what's your big deal? What's the problem? What's wrong with you? Mom, who is this guy? And I'm all like, what does it matter? You know, I go, Marilyn, I'm the adult. I'm the mother. Who are you? Who are you to tell me what I can do? Who are you? And then she said, Mom, I don't want to live here anymore. I don't want to live with you anymore. I don't trust you. Mom, what if this guy would have done something to me or to Jackie? At that moment, you know, I wish I can tell you that, you know, all of a sudden, you know, I woke up and I wanted to go to AA. And the first thing I told her was like, stay out of my life. Whatever I do is my business. And at that moment, I wanted to catch myself and just to be quiet and not say anything. And all I ended up doing is attacking my daughter. I remember I even told that guy, I go, hey, listen, you know, do you want, here I am people pleasing, right? Do you want to stay and then I can take you home in the morning, you know, and you're more than welcome to stay, you know, just anything, just not to mess my whatever I had with this guy. Wasn't even a relationship, you know. And he said, no, he goes, I can go home if you want. I said, okay. And I go, how did you get here? He goes, you don't remember? I go, no. He goes, you don't remember anything? I go, no. And at that point, I was so embarrassed. I didn't even want to ask. I didn't even want to ask him what happened. What did I do? I really didn't. I just thought to myself, what in the world did I do? Even to this day, I still don't remember what happened that night. I don't remember anything. The very next morning, and it was actually my car. My car was the one that he drove. He actually did end up staying. He stayed in the living room, and I drove him in the morning. It was so awkward. It was so weird. You know, here I am, and, you know, here's this kid. I call him a kid. I know he's probably like 20-something, but he was just a kid. What do you talk about, you know? And I was so embarrassed, and I just laughed, and I was just like, so, was it fun? You know, I mean, I didn't know what to say. You know, I was just so embarrassed. And I dropped him off at the club. He picked up his car. Obviously, actually, I've never even saw him again after that because I changed clubs. I changed gyms. But I ended up going straight to the psychiatrist or this family therapist guy, whatever. And then I walked in there, and, I mean, let me tell you, morally, I was so broken. Spiritually, I mean, I can't even explain to you how I felt. And that was the first time I thought to myself, that I said to myself in the car, I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. And I was driving down Mopac, you know, where David's office was, and I said, I'm going to tell this guy that I'm an alcoholic. And when I walked in, and he goes, hi, Nancy. I'm all like, hi, David, can I talk to you? I really need to talk to you, like, now. It's really important. He's all like, you know, this is our last session, right? I go, yes, I do know. I go, David, I said, I'm an alcoholic. And then he just sat at the edge of the chair. He goes, you are? I said, yes, I am. And I was going to tell him what happened or what I don't remember that happened. And what he said is, I'm an alcoholic, too. And I've been sober 25 years. See, I didn't know this, but that became actually my very first, I guess, 12-step. what he did is we did not talk about me anymore. What he did is he talked a little bit about him, you know, how he got there, what happened, you know. He got on the computer and he downloaded, he logged into this place called Hill Country Intergroup, where it's an intergroup that has all the meetings and schedules, which I had no idea that existed. And he downloaded a lot of meetings. And the first thing he said is, look, Nancy, I'm going to tell you one thing. He goes, you're going to have a lot of different misconceptions when you walk into clubs. A lot of people really don't work the program. They just kind of go to meetings and sit there, and they have this idea of what's about. But you need to make the decisions on what you want your recovery to be about. And he says, and AA meetings are like bars. You're going to have your meat market bars, your biker bars, your, you know. So he kind of gave me a little idea that if I'm not comfortable in my very first meeting, you know, that I have the right to go to another meeting, that I am not bound, I'm not tied just because I live in a certain neighborhood that I have to stay there. He says it's very important that you find a meeting that you're going to find women who will sponsor you, that are working the program. I mean, this is lingo that I have no idea what it's about, because remember, I've never been to an AA meeting. This is going to be my first time. So he was preparing me, and I just felt so safe. Today I realize how important, when I talk to other people, that I take the same care, that I let people know, you know, that AA is there for us, that you're going to find people there that, you know, that they found a new way of living, people that work the steps, people that don't work the steps, people, you know, there's just these different type of walks of people, just like I was when I walked in. I went to my very first meeting, and I remember, okay, so I wanted to make sure I look cute, right? Because I thought it was a classroom. So I curled my hair. I want to go get my nails done. Well, I got them done here too, but yeah. Anyway, so I got my nails done, you know, waxed, you know, eyebrows, lip, everything. You know, I wanted to look cute, you know, and I thought it was a classroom. I really did think it was a classroom. Because when you walk into an AA meeting, there's a desk, and there's somebody there with this very important book, you know, that he gets to read. And when I walked in there, you know, I walked into my very first meeting, and it was that very next day, and that was February 7th, 2008. So I'm just a few days away from my 5th year. Well, I think it's very important that I share with you that when I walked into that meeting, there were some people that were playing chess. I had just missed the last meeting. There was a little hour break, and another meeting was going to start. People are chit-chatting. There's a group of women over here talking. It was a smokers meeting, so it was very smoky in there. You know, I felt very uncomfortable because I felt so out of place. Like, what do I do? Like, how do you start this, right? You just walk in, and I thought, well, I look cute, you know. Had my makeup on, wore my heels, you know. Had to wear black because I look good in black, okay? And I walked in there, and I see, again, I didn't know how this worked. Just someone said, oh, help yourself to some coffee, you know, welcome. And that's all I got. Hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, welcome, have a seat. Oh, thank you, you know. And I'm all smiling, you know, everything's good, you know, I look cute. So finally, you know, right around when the meeting's going to start, then all the cars start driving in the driveway, in the parking lot. So, you know, all the women walk in and the men walk in. And, you know, I didn't know people have, like, that's John's chair. Nobody sits in John's chair, you know. You know, this is where so-and-so sits, you know, like, you don't sit, you know, no one sits there, you know. And so, so they made sure that I didn't sit in certain specific chairs, but I can sit there and I can sit there. And, you know, and I sat down, you know, and we don't know when we're new or someone's visiting from another group. Now I know, right, because I'm an AA. So they said that, you know, they opened up the meeting, and, you know, if anybody's here for their first time, you know, please raise your hand so we can welcome you. So I raised my hand, and you guys applauded, you know, and it was like, oh, this is nice. This is cute. They don't even know who I am, you know. And I remember they asked me to share. You know, they didn't tell me to shut up and sit down and be quiet. You know, they wanted to know who I was. You know, tell us, you know, who, you know, what's your name and where you. And, you know, I didn't realize they just wanted me to talk for like 3 minutes. You know, I talked for like 25, 30, you know. I only have an hour here, just an hour. That's it? Okay. But anyway, so, and I remember that very first meeting, and then I'm all like, well, my name is Nancy, and I'm an alcoholic, and I was like really happy to say that, right? Because I'm an alcoholic, because I already said it. I told David, and I told myself on the way to that meeting, the day before. And so anyway, I just remember, and they said, what brings you into AA? I fell apart. I talked about my dead husband. I talked about how my daughter doesn't trust me. I talked about how my parents are horrible. I talked about how my brothers, they didn't even call me. I mean, I was just making up crap left and right. I didn't know what else to add. I mean, I just kept going on and on. And I mean, there was truth in there, but there was just a lot of other nonsense, because I wanted to look really bad and really pathetic, And, but you guys can catch on when we're very, very pathetic. Stupid girl. And I just remember, but there was just something about, the women, because whether we're crazy and we don't know what we're talking about, you guys get to hear that grief. You get to hear that desperation of that drowning person that they talk about. And I was so broken. I really thought to myself, what am I going to do? I have no other option. There's nothing else that I can do. I'm going to try this. And I told myself that whole hour I'm sitting there, and then I hear you people share. And some people kind of, disregarded what I said and went into another topic. And, well, we got to talk about what the topic is about. We're not going to, derail because some new girl's talking about her parents. And, I mean, I got yelled at that moment. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, maybe I'm doing it wrong. I really thought I was doing it wrong. And other people took the other, road where they talked a little bit about where they came from. And so I got to now say, okay, I do belong here, But it was that very first meeting that I did make that connection, because I heard a lot of positive things about, AA has solutions to any problems you bring to the table. There's nothing out there that you're not going to find a solution for. Nothing. And boy, that got me. It really did. But let me tell you something. Before I left that meeting, those women, they surrounded me. They introduced themselves. John, the gentleman, the chair guy, keep coming back one day at a time. That's all I heard from him. Keep coming back one day at a time. Look at me. I'm crazy, but I'm sober, And God bless his heart, because he's still there. And I'll tell you, when I left that meeting, okay, so this is important. So when I left that meeting, I remember saying, do I want to go back? Do I really want to go back to this? I didn't find any Hispanic women that looked like me. I didn't see anybody there that no one talked about that they lost their husband. No one talked about how they have a responsibility and a mortgage, No one, there was no, I couldn't compare myself because everybody over there were like, blonde, and some had no makeup on, and some wore jeans, and some were biker chicks in there, and the other ladies that were knitting. And so I was trying to find like that Hispanic woman that was in there like me, and I couldn't find her. And I said, oh, this sucks, And I know what David said. He said that if I don't like it, I can go to another meeting, right? So, but I said, no, I'm going to go back because I remember how it made me feel. But I remember it was so important to me because that drive, when that meeting was over to my house, I really said, I might not go back. I don't think so. I didn't feel like I belonged there. I don't know. I just thought I was like, I don't know. Like I just didn't belong there. But when my car hit my driveway in my house, that depression, that fear, it took over me, and it was horrific. It was the worst feeling of my life. I couldn't wait for the next day. Like I couldn't even sleep that day. The very next day, I got on that hill country list that they gave me, and then there was another meeting in the morning, only it was somewhere else. I went to that meeting, and I found the same people there, just different faces, but I kept hearing the same solution-based talk, and I thought, okay. So I ended up going back to that other meeting at 8 o'clock, and I ended up going there for months, and I started going every day. It took me a whole week and a half to get a sponsor, a whole week and a half. Because I don't know what it is not to have somebody there for me today. And I got myself a sponsor. I didn't like her. She was a nice lady, but I didn't like her because she just kept telling me, oh, you're selfish. Oh, you're self-centered. Really? How's that working for you? I'm like, oh my God, really? Like my mother doesn't even talk to me that way. Like, you're gonna insult me this way? I thought to myself, this isn't gonna work. And I kept telling her, this isn't gonna work because I'm Mexican. It's not gonna work. No one's gonna tell me what to do, When you have your first nervous breakdown in sobriety, and the whole world is collapsing around you, let me tell you, my beautiful, beautiful first sponsor, I couldn't wait to call her and tell her what a mess I was. And I could just hear her voice saying, oh my God, Nancy, I'll be right over. I ended up making coffee, and she knows I like to cook. She was like, you gonna make breakfast? I go, yes, I'll make breakfast for you. She came over, and that was my heart-to-heart, very first connection with this woman. And she got to reveal a lot of more personal stuff about her, which won my confidence. I got to share with her a little bit more about myself. When I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was so bored because I was going to meetings every day, and I thought to myself, this sucks. I like going, don't get me wrong, I like it, but I was going to hear the same thing from you, and then you're going to talk about, your boyfriend again, and I'm like, I already knew everybody. I go, what am I doing here? So I started making up stuff, I wanted, my stories were I'm going to change them. Every single time I'm going to change my stories, right? Not that it wasn't true. I was just like that one. And then the last time I forgot to tell you guys, But it didn't really matter because, I thought to myself, look, I was going to meetings. Who cares? I'm sitting there, we're not all 100% honest. Some of us, we do lie a little bit. I didn't realize some people actually, they really are honest, really, all the time. And so, on my third month in Alcoholics Anonymous, they asked me if I wanted to chair. Well, of course. I will take every Thursday for the rest of my life. And I loved it because you guys kept saying, it's the best seat in the house. And I wanted the best seat in the house. And so I took a copy. I didn't even tell them. I took a copy home, and I practiced in the mirror, facial expressions. I did. Oh my God, if they hear this, I've never told anybody. I didn't know how to say anonymity, so I practiced. I didn't know how to say, autonomous, I practiced, And it was wonderful. It really was. I was just glowing, because I found a purpose, I was going to chair a meeting. And even that, but that feeling kind of goes away as well. Eventually they did invite me to participate in we have meetings. They're called, group conscience meetings, and this is where we make decisions for the group. And if you really like your group, if you really want to be a part of it, why don't you come and join us? And I said, okay. I go, what do you guys talk about? Well, if we have to change the coffee brand, if we're going to move the chairs around, if we're going to paint the building or whatever. And I'm all like, really? I said, okay. I go, you guys have a meeting for that? He goes, yeah. I go, okay. So I started going to the group conscience meetings, and boy, talk about passion, man. I saw people there whip out these books that had traditions in there, and people like, you're saying it wrong, and they know that this is what it means, and tradition 1 trumps tradition 7, and it was just it was like chess, right? It was awesome, but to see my friends and the people that I hated in my meeting become so passionate about the color of the walls, where the chairs are gonna go, That was awesome. I loved it. And I'm like, how do I get into this, So I got to learn about traditions, just a little bit, not a lot, just, I'm going to read this. So right around 6 months, I was getting very bored again. I'm like, this is boring. Like, I need something different, So they asked me, why don't you, they have workshops, you can go to workshops in other places. I didn't even know what workshops were. Oh, Northland is having a workshop. They're going to talk about this. If you want, it's a couple of hours. They're having speakers. You can go to speaker meetings. They fly people from all over, and they talk about their story. Some of them are really funny, and some of them are like real serious. He goes, but you're going to like it. I go, okay. I got hooked on, I'm horrible, but I got hooked on speaker meetings, and I loved it. I loved that as well, So right around 9 months, I was 9 months sober, right? And there's this thing called a GSR that represents a group, right? And I didn't know that the GSR gets to travel, They get to travel to these other meetings that are outside our meetings, and they're called district meetings. That's fascinating. That's so awesome, So there's meetings outside of these meetings as well, business meetings. And what do? Oh, well, it's divided by districts, and, and we make sure that there's literature and what's going on in our community. Do we need more meetings? Are some meetings not following traditions? Are they really AA meetings? So it's like, oh, this is great. So the person that was our GSR, unfortunately, he was no longer a member of sober members of Alcoholics Anonymous. So that position became available. Here I am, 9 months sober, and now I'm going to these group conscience meetings, right? I'm telling you, I was so bored. Every day I was going to meetings, every day, and I was so bored, because I'm being honest. And I just wanted something different, and I remember that meeting, one of the members there, and he says, hey, Nancy, he goes, there's a position that's open. Why don't you do it? I go, what is it? He goes, well, we need a GSR. The traveling one? I go, yeah, that's awesome. Because I just was a traveling, right? I go, I don't know if I can do it. I'm only 9 months sober. Sure you can. Look at you. He goes, you're smart. You have a sponsor. You chair meetings. He goes, you're reading traditions. He goes, that's all you need is a desire. That if you want to do it, you can do it. I said, okay. So I'm all excited, right, because I'm going to be the GSR, right? And then so all of a sudden everyone's all like, does anybody else, we're looking for candidates or whatever. So I was like, should I raise my hand? He goes, no, I'll do it for you. So he raises his hand. He says, I know this fabulous lady. She's so wonderful. And I think she's going to represent us, and she's going to do such a good job. And I nominate Nancy. And I mean, you think that the everything opened and the sun came out, and I looked good. My lipstick was perfect, and I fit the part, the GSR part. And I go, does anybody else want to do the GSR position? Nothing. I didn't hear nothing. No one. Wow. I got it. I was excited. I didn't want any competition. So I go to I was so excited. And then when they said that they were going to pay my gas and 3 meals, oh, forget it. I'm definitely going to do this. So, but imagine that very first fear of leaving your home group or your area to travel 3 hours away, because Brownwood was that very first event, and I remember. And I went to Brownwood, and then I called my sponsor, and I said, I really said this. I said, what if I get drunk from my house to the district, to the area meeting? And then she says, what do you mean? What if you get drunk? Well, it's 3 hours. Like, a lot of things can happen in those 3 hours. Because I've never been without a babysitter. You know what I mean. Like, always either someone in the program next to me, or we're going to meetings together, or my sponsor. And I really thought that those 3 hours, I really did think that what if I pull over and I get drunk? That's scary. And that's a real fear. It's a real fear. Here I am, 9 months sober. But there's something about having a responsibility to be the GSR. I can't fail my home group. I have to be responsible. And it's so funny because I really carried that, that feeling of like, no, Nancy, you were selected as a GSR. You have to make it and stay sober. And when I got there, oh my gosh, I can't even explain to you a whole different level of sobriety. People that were happy, and they were laughing, and they were kidding around. And I mean, I've never seen that, because in my group, there's a lot of grieving going on in our home groups. There's a lot of new people coming in. There's a lot of people that still don't have any sponsors. So we're still kind of like in that, we're still kind of not sure if we want to stay, not stay. But you go to these area events, and boy, these people are here to stay. And the passion they carry. And I'm telling you, when I saw people at area, I definitely said, I want this. I want to be that happy. I want to be that happy in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm telling you, I was hooked. And I remember I met James, and I met several people. Daddy. I met several people that I never thought that they were going to be a big part of my life today, especially in the service position. So at 9 months, there I am, and I'm taking notes, And I'll tell you, sometimes we have these beautiful events, and we do have events, but when they send me as a GSR, I promise you that you're never, not that I'm perfect, but you're never going to see me in the pool or dancing around if there's a business meeting. You're always going to catch me at a business meeting. You're always going to see me taking notes, because I had to make sure that I gave a really good report when I came back. No one listened to me. Nobody cared. Nobody. And I had my very first resentment. I was so angry. And then someone said, "Do you have a service sponsor?" I said, "What is that?" Service sponsor is going to walk you through these experiences, now that, and they're going to teach you about traditions and love and kindness and respect, even to those that don't carry that same passion that you do, And I got myself a service sponsor. And so all those little mini resentments that I was getting while I was doing this service as a GSR, she got to walk me through this. And I'm so grateful for that. Because every time I wanted to say something ill about so-and-so, how can she say that? Isn't she sober 20 years? Why is she doing that? Why is she so evil? Like in my mind, right? And so my service sponsor, she goes, like she would just listen to everything I would say, And then she would come up with these beautiful things called principles and kindness and love and understanding, And goes, "Honey, this is where you get to apply all this stuff, And remember, we're human and we're alcoholic, and we're not perfect. All these people have the same desire. They also want to stay sober. Only now they want to give back to their community by being of service." So I was 9 months sober, and it was towards the end of that term, for the term that my friend didn't end. So then, when you're that alternate, they automatically, they assume that you're going to take the GSR position, because by then supposedly I had enough experience in whatever was going on. I didn't, but it's okay, because the first one was so beautiful that I ended up getting an actual term, so I became a GSR for 3 years. But at that point, I was invited. I went over to, our area 68. We do these events, and they're bilingual. So, we get to invite the Spanish-speaking community. And I'm all like, I speak Spanish, And I go, how can I use these God-given talents that God gave me, and how can I incorporate it inside, Alcoholics Anonymous? I'm bilingual. And I remember I went up to the lady that was the current translator for our area, and then I asked her, I said, "Hey," I go, "can I help you? If you need to go to the restroom, do you want me?" Heck yeah! She took that thing off. She goes, "Here you go, girl." I said, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how to speak AA in Spanish. What do I do?" She goes, "No, don't worry about it." I go, "They're going to go up there. They're just going to talk normal. They're not going to say anything crazy. They're just going to, they're going to blah, blah, blah." I said, "Okay." So she let me borrow that. And the first time, it was so funny. The first time I did the translation, I was in heaven. I thought to myself, this is beautiful. I could do this. what that did, what I ended up doing is I ended up reading now the service manual and the traditions. Not only did I have to study the English ones, but I had to now read the Spanish ones at the same time. I had to now go and ask the members, how do you say GSR in Spanish? ORCG. How do you say, GSO? OSG. So everything is like backwards. So I had a really hard time because when you translate it, like your mind, like it doesn't flip anything around. You have to flip it, right? So anyway, and I got to learn how to speak AA in Spanish during my area service. And I did that for 2 years. And what happened is when I walked into, when I started translating, and I got to know this other set of fellowship and the Spanish-speaking community, I fell in love. The passion that they carry is uncomparable. I've never seen a group of men that they carry so much passion for service. I transitioned into the Spanish-speaking meetings about a year ago, and a year and 2 months ago. And I remember when I was done with my area service, I said I need to get into that aspect of my recovery. I ended up going to Spanish meetings. Let me tell you, if you ever go to a Spanish meeting, you're going to hear a lot of profanity. There's going to be a lot of craziness. They're going to talk about very, very personal things. And to be a woman and sit at a Spanish meeting is very traumatic. It really, no, and I mean it, because I would leave those meetings crying, and I thought to myself, what in the world did I do? But I'm going to tell you right now, again, you have to get yourself a sponsor. I had to get myself a sponsor in the Spanish-speaking that would walk me through all that. Because let me tell you, if you're a female and you're in these Spanish-speaking meetings, and if you can survive a business meeting and a regular meeting, nothing that happens out there is impossible. Nothing. Because of my Spanish-speaking community, I've had to step up not only my relationship with my children, with my parents. They now become very essential in my life. Not that AA is not, because I always have to come first. I got to take care of that. But I have to make sure that when I come to these events, that my children are aware that I'm going to come here. Is that okay? I even have to ask them their permission, because I'm taking away from my family time. I really do. Monday through Fridays, I'm always at a meeting, and on the weekends, I got to make sure I invite my kids to come with me. Sometimes they don't like coming here because they know that I'm always here, or I'm stuck, or I like listening to, speakers. But I have so much love and respect for my children. I thank them constantly for allowing me to do what I do. And I tell you, I tried taking my children to Alateen, and it wasn't for them. I really did. I tried. And the fact is that if they're comfortable right now with what mom is doing, then I'm okay with it. Whatever happens in the future, we'll deal with that later. But for today, I'm very grateful that I now get to be a part of that community as well. We're very limited in regards to it's a very, very unbalanced when it comes to men and women in the Spanish-speaking community. I'm going to tell you right now, everything has to happen on God's time. Things cannot be forced. I'm very grateful that for the time being that so long as I show them love and respect, the men in the groups, they show the same respect to me. Again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share with you a little bit about my life. My name is Nancy, and I am an alcoholic. Thanks.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.